So yesterday we talked about one mode of tissue dynamics, that is morphogenesis. So today we will cover another dynamic state of the tissue, that is tissue repair. So I think I have received from Vasudev just now. So you have sent late. It's fine. But Bhupendra is yet to send me. Okay, fine. So as I was saying that let's understand how the wound healing process happens in our tissue. Okay, so this wound healing process, as the name suggests, will only begin when there is some tissue injury. Okay, so it's a completely a different process from the normal steady state process that we have seen, and it is a special process that takes place under special circumstances, that is when the tissue is injured. So when the tissue is injured, a healing response is induced that is comprised of a coordinated series of cellular events. Okay, and how fast these events will proceed, etc., and the number of cells involved, these all vary with the age of a person. So if a young baby, like who is less than 1 years old, if he or she gets hurt, her wound will heal faster in comparison to a person who say 60 years old. So this rate of repair also varies with age, but the main thing is this entire process is highly coordinated in nature, and a lot of number of cells are involved in this. The healing of adult tissue is slower, as I said, and it often leads to scarring. So when healing has done, we often see a like very light colored line, okay, on our skin. Okay, that is the scar that has formed. So in adults, when the wound has repaired, so in the end product, you will usually see one scar. And the tissue function restoration is kind of satisfactory, and in sometimes the normal tissue function is not at all restored, so there is not always fully restoring normal tissue structure. So some satisfactory healing takes place. Okay, Vani has also sent me just now. Okay, that's fine, but make sure that from the next time you guys send within the time. Okay, so Bhupendra, I have not received your answer script. Is there any issue that you're facing?
No, ma'am, I have sent you mail by mail.
By mail? Okay, okay, let me check. Okay, fine, I have received. Okay, I have received. So I think all of you have submitted. So let me just continue with the lecture. So I was saying that in adult, the tissue repair process is kind of slower, and at the end we often see a scar. So this the restoration, the tissue structure restoration and the function restoration in some is sometimes satisfactory. It is not exactly the same as it was previously, like before the wound. The state of the tissue returns to somewhat similar to a normal condition, but it is entirely not normal. Okay, you get what I mean, right? But whereas if a fetus, inside the womb, if a fetus some like in somehow in any way gets some kind of a injury to her tissue or his tissue, then the wound healing process that will take place in that fetus, it is like relatively faster. So it proceeds at a faster rate, and it leads to a scarless tissue means formation, means the tissue completely returns back to its original state. There is no formation of any scar. So that is why the people who are working in the field of tissue engineering, the one potential area of research is the fetal wound healing. So they are trying to understand the underlying mechanisms behind the fetal wound healing and trying to engineer, and trying to manipulate the native wound healing, so that in the end result of tissue repair, we get a scarless kind of a tissue at the wound site. Okay, and also the rate of tissue repair becomes faster. So this is an active area of research. So various
Ma'am,
kind of
you are not
pipelines.
audible.
Um, is it the same thing for everyone? Am I not audible for everyone?
No, no, audible.
You are audible, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe you can check your speaker once and try again.
Hello, ma'am, you are not audible.
I'm not audible. See, my mic is on from this side, and others are saying that. Okay, maybe he has left and will join again. That's fine. So as I was saying, that many fibrotic tissues. So I was saying that many fibrotic tissues, or sorry, fibrotic diseases, where in these diseases, these are where large amount of fibrosis happens, or just random formation of scar tissue, uh, which is mainly composed of ECM proteins like collagen, etc. So in these kind of fibrotic diseases, it often resembles the wound healing process, but the wound healing process is not normal. It is like abnormal wound healing takes place in these kind of diseases, and these diseases often result to formation of scarring, a large amount of scarring. Okay, now to some degree, all tissue engineering therapies will invoke the wound healing response. Even the injection of hematopoietic stem cells into the circulation involves a wound healing response at the site of injection. So any kind of tissue engineering therapy, be it injecting or be it like proper grafting, all of these kind of therapies will invoke some kind of a wound healing response. So as it is written, even if you inject a drug, okay, like we get vaccines, and also at that site as well a wound is created, so a minor and maybe a short term wound healing response will be triggered. The entire process can be broken down into 4 phases. First is hemostasis. The word hemostasis means making the blood still. So this during this phase, the main job of the body is stop the bleeding. Then the inflammation process happens. So here the inflammatory cells in our body, they come into role here. The main role is of the inflammatory cells. Then proliferation phase, and lastly remodeling. So now in this discussion, we are covering the scenario of normal wound healing. Means we are not talking about what or how the body will react when an artificial tissue graft has been implanted, because there also our body will invoke some kind of wound healing response. So when we'll talk about the biomaterials part and how the scaffold is made, there we will discuss this process, like what all phases are involved, or how the host, that is we, how our body, how the host reacts to the external or the foreign material, that is the tissue graft. So there also some kind of wound healing response invokes, but here we are talking about the simple wound healing that normally happens when you get a cut on your skin or in any kind of internal injury, etc. Okay, so talking about that only. So we can actually visualize what happens in all the 4 phases of wound healing. So as I said, the first phase is called hemostasis, where the job of the body is to make the bleeding stop. So which is why a blood clot is formed. Then when the area is like covered from the external environment, then the inflammatory or the inflammation process begin. So here the inflammatory cells like neutrophils, macrophages, etc., they come into play, they try to engulf any foreign material that have entered from outside, okay, and kind of make the area free from any potential infectious agents. Then in the proliferation phase, here so this is the image of a skin basically. So during the proliferation phase, the wound has successfully, ruptured the dermis layer as well. So here the fibroblasts are the main residents. So during proliferation, these fibroblast cells, they are activated to, divide more in order to cover that area, as well as the epidermis layer. So the keratinocytes are the main residents. They will also show this high rate of cell division and try to cover that area. And if any, it definitely some blood vessels are also ruptured. So the endothelial cells will also, divide continuously and like make continuous blood vessels so that there is no leakage of blood anywhere. And lastly, the remodeling phase. Here the scar development of the scar happens. This remodeling phase is the last phase, and in adults, like as we age more and more, this remodeling phase can like take years, even like months and years to complete. So this was the description of the wound healing process in very brief. Now we'll go into the details of each of the phases one by one. Now here I'm taking the example of skin tissue because it is easy to visualize and understand. Like all of you must have got any cut or any kind of wound on your skin throughout your life, so you can actually visualize as well. You can, as I'm explaining you the things. So disruption of the normal anatomic structure of tissue damages the blood vessels, okay, and also it damages the cell. So because of which the underlying basement membrane, that is the layer just present below the epidermis, that is also exposed. That leads to loss of blood in from the intravascular space, like from the blood vessels the blood starts coming out. So the hemostasis, the term hemostasis, it means blood be still, means stop the blood flow. So within seconds of the injury, platelets from the blood circulation, they arrive at the injury site, and these platelets becomes activated, and they start secreting the contents, whatever contents are there in their storage granules. And then these platelets also spread and recruit more platelets. So because of the activity of the platelets, you see the formation of the blood clot, or another term of blood clot is called thrombus. So within seconds this blood clot has started to develop because of the active participation of platelets. Now due to the platelets, a number of cascades are also initiated at that site. So cascades like complement cascade, clotting cascade, arachidonic acid pathways. So these cascades also get initiated. So these are basically some biochemical pathways that result in formation of some protein product or any kind of small molecules, etc. So these cascades lead to the formation of the fibrin clot. What is fibrin? Fibrin is again one hydrogel kind of a polymer, you can say a natural polymer that people have used to their advantage for making scaffolds and tissue engineering. And how the fibrin is formed? The precursor of fibrin is fibrinogen. Okay, so and in presence of an enzyme called thrombin, this fibrin is formed. So it basically is a hydrogel structure that gets formed when the enzyme thrombin is there. And the synthesis of the thrombin, how it will happen? It will happen through the clotting cascade. All right. So fibrin clot is formed as well. Now this clot acts as a matrix or provisional matrix that is going to help in further healing process. Okay. So the results of these cascades, like how these cascades are helping. So first thing that they did is, formation of a provisional matrix made of fibrin. Okay, that is going to help in further steps. Next, these cascades help in constriction of the blood vessels, leaking blood vessels. So in order to stop the flow of the blood or reduce the flow of the blood, the diameter of the blood vessels are made narrow through constriction, so that not much of the blood gets lost. So that thing happens. Next, this cascade also help in recruiting other cell populations that are needed at the wound site. So these are few important contributions of the cascades that were initiated by the first residents of the injury, that is the platelets. The platelets, they get trapped. So the platelets which originally uh, arrived at the wound site, they are not going to leave. They are instead getting trapped in the provisional matrix, which was made up of fibrin. As I said, it's a hydrogel, so it is having a matrix of uh, polymer chains. So in that matrix, the platelets has got trapped, and while being trapped, they are continuing their work of releasing some growth factors. So these growth factors, the cytokines, they are going to play a very important role in recruiting more and more cell populations at the wound site for the subsequent phases of wound healing. So any queries till now? Anyone? Okay.
Ma'am,
So yes, yeah.
then in hemostasis only the clotting will happen.
Yes,
Only
yes,
after
correct.
clotting, only if it is completed, then the other steps will start, right?
Yes, correct, correct, correct. You're
Okay.
correct. So next step after the clot has formed, you need to the body needs to recruit the inflammatory cells to cleanse that area of any foreign materials that might have entered from outside. So for that, inflammatory cells play a very important role. So you can actually see the inflammation happening if you see four things, four main physical characteristics at the site of wound healing. So you often see that the area becomes red. So that is called rubor or redness. Then the area often becomes swelled up, like when you get bitten by an ant, it becomes swelled up, right? That's also a wound healing response or inflammatory response that has taken place. That is tumor or swelling. So these are all Greek words, okay, people have given. Then often that area becomes slightly heated up. If you touch it, it will feel little bit more warm in comparison to the surrounding area. So there is generation of some heat. It is calor. And lastly, dolor. You will feel pain. Okay. So when these four things happen, it will mark the onset of the inflammation process. Now, hemostasis, it takes minutes to complete, whereas inflammation, if the area is you know very large, the wound area is very large, or if the injury is too deep, then it can take days as well. Okay. If it's a small cut or something like that, the inflammation can finish in minutes. So the redness, why redness happens? This redness happens because the blood vessels, they get dilated. Right. So due to dilation of the blood vessels, the site becomes red. Now how this dilation happened? It happened in response to a class of compounds that is called prostaglandins, and these prostaglandins were initially are the products of the arachidonic acid pathway that we just saw in the hemostasis phase. This pathway got initiated, right? So this pathway got initiated, and as a result, it secreted few compounds, a class of compounds called prostaglandins. Now these prostaglandins helped in dilation of the blood vessels, because of which the area has become bit red. So if the blood vessel has become dilated, then the flow of the blood will increase, correct? So as a result, the blood flow also increases at the site. Now after the bleeding has stopped, okay, the clot has formed, so no more leakage of blood to the outside. So after the bleeding has stopped, the vascular permeability increases. Actually it increases. Now initial response was to constrict the leaky blood vessels, don't let blood vessels the blood to leak out. Now once the bleeding has stopped, uh, the permeability means now the blood components like the plasma proteins and the cells like macrophages, neutrophils, etc., now they can ooze out, or simply slip out from the blood vessels, and the endothelium is activated. So what is activation of endothelium? So this happens only during wound healing, okay? It doesn't happen normally. So by activation, I mean that it starts secreting special kind of cytokines and chemokines to recruit more cells. Also, it secretes, starts expressing special kind of cell adhesion proteins on the cell surface. Okay, so for better quick formation of subsequent new blood vessels, like angiogenesis will happen later on. So for that, the cells secrete different kind of cell adhesion proteins. So these functions get displayed, and also it secretes cytokines to, or the growth factors to recruit more inflammatory cells. So these kind of activity, when it starts showing, then we will say that the endothelium or the endothelial cells are activated. The swelling is caused by the leakage of the plasma protein through these leaky vessels. So since, as I said, blood vessel permeability has increased, so definitely the plasma proteins or the plasma will start leaking out, and because of that leaking, that area has become kindly swelled up. The local heat that you experience, that is the calor you experience, is because the metabolic rate of the cells involved there, they are quite high, because they have to undergo a very high rate of cell division in order to cover that area. So the metabolic rates are high, so the heat is produced, as well as the due to dilation of the blood vessels. As I said, the blood flow have increased. The blood flow, to the increase of the blood flow, the excess heat of the body that the body needs to escape, okay, that body doesn't need anymore, that also gets escaped from that site of the wound. Okay, so uh, more blood flow, so it's easy escape for the heat from the body. Okay, so because of which resultant local heat that you experience at the site of inflammation, means at the site of the wound. So these are the four phases of wound healing, and now you have understood why you experience this redness or this swelling or this heat, and the pain is definitely you can feel. um, Now the blood in the blood, there are WBCs, right? Now these WBCs start coming in from the blood vessels. They will start interact with the activated endothelium. So as I said, endothelium has started secreting the cytokines. So these cytokines have played an important role in recruiting the WBCs at the site of wound. The cells that infiltrate the wound first are the phagocytic neutrophils, followed by monocytes that transform into macrophages. So usually in the body, macrophages are not present. It is the monocytes that are present. Monocytes gets changed, transformed, or you can say differentiated into activated macrophages. So the neutrophils of the macrophages, they have the capability to phagocytose any foreign material and neutralize their effect. So these cells also come into the wound site along with the white blood cells. So at the site, at the end, towards the end of the inflammation, what happens in the provisional matrix that was formed in the hemostasis phase? So there were the trapped platelets. Now the macrophages also remain towards the end, and they will continue do their job by secreting some important factors that will help in promotion of angiogenesis, which is the process through which new blood vessels will start forming from the existing one. So we'll talk about how angiogenesis happens in the later session, but for now you should know angiogenesis is the process through which new blood vessels get formed from the existing blood vessels. Also, the processes of chemotaxis. What is chemotaxis? Like, what is the cell migration that happens in response to a chemical, that is growth factors. Okay, so when the cells sense the presence of that growth factors, then the cell starts to migrate. The chemotaxis happens, as well as the mitosis. Mitosis means cell division of the surrounding fibroblast. So these, for angiogenesis, for chemotaxis, for mitosis of fibroblast, the trapped platelets and the macrophages start secreting these factors towards the end of the inflammation process. So this mitosis of the fibroblast is going to continue till the next phase. Okay, the next phase, that is the proliferation phase. So the cells need to divide a lot, and finally, the lymphocytes, the T lymphocytes, the B lymphocytes, they also infiltrate the wound towards the end of the inflammation. So this is about the inflammation phase. So you can see in this like graph, in this graph, this is a very important graph actually, that explains the how the cells population are changing through the time of wound healing. So you will see initially, like within seconds, 30 seconds to 1 minute, the hemostasis phase is complete. So here the hemostasis phase is complete, and the main population of the cell that is involved is the platelet. And during the hemostasis phase, this provisional matrix that is made up of the fibrin, hydrogen, that is also formed. And as the hemostasis phase ends, you will see, so these phases are overlapping. You cannot cannot make a distinct mark. You can see this is the overlapping phases, right? This is the overlapping. Here also it is overlapping. So you can see that two phases, one phase is towards the end, whereas another phase is just going to begin. So this is a overlapping thing that is going on. So in the inflammation phase, you will see the neutrophils, PMNs, okay, and the macrophages. Their population is increasing. You can see that the numbers, this graph is increasing during the inflammation phase. Now, as the inflammation phase is uh, coming to end, like say within days, like weeks or days, okay, then the proliferation phase begins. So what will proliferate? So usually the fibroblasts, that is the present in the dermis, then the endothelial cells. Okay, so these all cells, their metabolic rate increases, and they starts dividing at a very rapid rate. So the cell number of fibroblast and the endothelial cells, they come to a peak during the proliferation phase. And this proliferation phase, it goes on till months as well. So for few, like 10 days or few weeks. Okay, so it's a long process. It's a long process. If the wound is big, then the proliferation phase will last even longer. And lastly, the tissue remodeling, where the scar formation will happen. So this tissue remodeling phase is the end phase of the wound healing, where the top layer of the skin, that is the epidermis, gets fully made by the cells, keratinocytes, as well as the ECM components like the collagen, etc. They also synthesized at a sufficient amount to give the strength to the injured area. So this tissue remodeling, it can take from weeks to years, okay, depending on the age of the host. So this is how you can like understand the involvement of different cell populations in different phases of wound healing. So this is a very important graph, okay, and it will also help you understand the time scales. So you must kind of roughly should be able to draw it, even not the correct peaks and all, but you should be able to understand, you should be able to remember in which phase which cell population is peaking, means it is at the highest cell number. Okay, so I'll take 10 more minutes and finish up this topic. Okay, then the proliferative phase, so it can take from days to weeks. So then the next part of wound healing response, the populations of the fibroblast and the endothelial cells, they start to reconstruct the tissue, as I told you. So the fibroblasts, they form what is called the granulation tissue by secreting the ECM components. Now this will be remodeled later during the remodeling phase. So during proliferative phase, the fibroblast starts secreting some ECM proteins like collagen, etc., and forms what is called a granulation tissue. The granulation tissue you can actually see if you peel off the clot, the dark brownish hardened up structure. If you peel off the clot when it is not painful anymore, so the pain is there during inflammation. After the pain is gone, we often peel it off. Then you can see below is a very thin lightly pink color structure. So that is the granulation tissue that has been formed, and now you can understand the proliferative phase have started to begin. So the epithelial cells, that is the in case of skin, the keratinocytes, they will start the process which is called epithelialization, where the wound begins to close. So how the wound is closing here? Someone is okay. So what happens is that the epithelial cell, that is the keratinocytes, they become flat. They become flat. So if this is the wound, so these are the edges. These are the wound edges. So at these edges, the epithelial cells become flat. They divide and crawl. That is migrate along this slightly pink colored granulation tissue. And as they are dividing and then migrating, they are covering the entire wound area. So this process of cell division, that is epithelial division and migration, continues until the epithelial cells come into contact with one another. So the contact inhibition process is helping process. This process is helping in stopping the stopping any more migration or division. Okay, it is stopping that. So once the cells are in contact, no more division and no more migration of the epithelial cells. And now the cells have understood that the wound area has been covered. Now the wound also closes via contraction. So one process that is helping in wound closure is the epithelialization by the epithelial cells. Another process that is helping is the contraction process. Now this contraction process is done by a hybrid cell type, that is myofibroblast. The main cell type that is involved in wound contracture is the myofibroblast. The other cells are also involved, like fibroblasts, endothelial cells, macrophages, etc., and the assembly and synthesis of ECM. So these are also helping, to close the wound. But if you say contraction, that is the, if you closed your palm, or the muscle contraction. So if that kind of thing that happens, then the main cell population that is involved is the myofibroblast. So the myofibroblasts, they are hybrid. They're hybrid of what? They show the characteristics of both fibroblast and muscle. So like muscle, they can contract and relax, and like fibroblast, they are able to secrete the ECM components, the main ECM component of skin, like collagen, etc. okay, and make and fully form the dermis layer. So they regulate the rate of wound contracture. Finally, over time, what happens? The ECM, a large amount of ECM proteins are produced, which increases the tensile strength of the wound area. Okay, it is not easy now. Now the state has become that the wound is kind of harmless from the external factors, like any sharp object that starts striking, or any you fall again at that site. Okay, you fall again and get injured at the site. Now that site is not weak anymore, it can sustain itself. Now in adults, the healed wound rarely regain their pre-wound strength. Okay, complete healing, as I said, is means it happens. The healing happens, but the extent of healing is, it doesn't result in a tissue structure which was there before the wound. So because of which, so during the healing, not enough amount of ECM components get produced, or the composition of ECM components of that area have changed a little bit, because of which the strength, the tensile strength, is not the same as it was before. The last phase, that is the remodeling phase. Now it is the longest phase of the wound healing process. It can take years, like maximum years. So patients, diabetic patients, the main symptom is delayed wound healing. So for them it can take years as well. During this phase, the tissue remodels. There is a coordinated synthesis and degradation of ECM proteins that takes place. Remodeling means whatever response that has happened, it has happened in order to contain that area, in order to protect that area, in order to cover that area fully. Now the tissue is trying to make that area to its, or to bring that area to its original state, which is why remodeling, like we remodel our house when we move into a new flat or anything like that. Similarly, the tissue also, the cells that are involved, they also try to remodel it to the previous state. So during this remodeling phase, what happens? There is a change in the composition of the matrix over the time. Like initially in skin, collagen type 3 is abundant, but as time progresses, collagen type 1, it becomes the main component of the ECM. Okay, then the ECM molecules, they also become reorganized. So collagen fibers, they are a fiber kind of a structure, so the orientation of the fibers, they gets changed in response to the tension that it is experiencing. And as a result of all these processes, what you see, a scar gets formed. Now although the wound appears healed at this time, okay, by this time you can see the wound has kind of healed, but the structural and the chemical changes, it keeps on happening at the wound site, which is not visible to us. And like after few months or few years, you will see a nice clean scar has formed. That is, the resolution of scar has happened. You can now say the wound has completely healed. So in skin, you can see the scar has become flattened or even lighter, and it contains less blood vessels and less fibroblast. So you can see sometimes a white colored line. So usually it's the ECM proteins that are present mostly there, and the area has become flat, and like it has become normal, like flat as the surrounding area. So that is how the final outlook of the area looks once the wound healing has done or has completed. So the formation and degradation of the matrix returns to its normal state. This process can take many months. And finally, the composition and the spatial localization of the cells, it tries to return back to its original state. Okay, cell orientation and the cell position also try to go back to the state which was there before the wound. So it is very important for the tissue engineers to understand this entire wound healing process, because whenever you place any artificial tissue graft over the injured area, you will see a similar response to this wound healing process that we will study when we'll talk about biomaterials, okay, and this biomaterial scaffolds. So we will talk about what happens then. But the response is very similar to what we have studied just now. So if there are any doubts, you guys can let me know. Otherwise, I have finished my discussion.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
why we code fibronectin in the tissue culture flask, ma'am?
Fibronectin tissue culture. So can you give me one example where you have seen
Uh,
that people are
uh, Ma'am, in last class, my professor said in tissue culture class we code fibronectin. He said that it will act as a helps in othering the cells. That's what he said.
okay? So remember during a previous discussion, I actually showed you the structure of the fibronectin. I think 2 or 3 session back. You can go back and see that structure. So you will see there are special cell binding domains. Okay, so through those
Okay.
cell binding domains, the cells can adhere. And for the adherent cell population, you need a substrate to which that promotes cell adhesion. So your professor has given the example of fibronectin, but people use other materials as well, like collagen, gelatin, etc. So all these natural materials, they have a unique property of having that cell binding domains. So in the review paper as well, I mentioned that the natural materials do have these characteristics. Okay.
From where we extract that, ma'am? From animals, ma'am?
Yes. We so collagen, fibronectin, or gelatin. These all are derived from animals like pig tissue or rat tissue, bovine. So we extract that. So, but there are many plant-based materials as well, or seafood like chitosan is extracted from the shells of the prawns, etc. Then there are other plant-based materials as well, but you won't get that cell binding domains there. You have to artificially incorporate those. But in animals, like in species which are relatively, closer relatives like pig or bovine, so in their ECM you will find a cell domain to which our cells, like the human cells, they can recognize these domains and bind to it.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any more doubts? All right. So let me mm, stop recording.